Well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster as we chronicle what's going on financially in our nation. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are just on the edge of a terrible financial collapse. And certainly the market was down almost 300 points when I last looked at it. Now, you have to understand that the market is manipulated by the Working Group on Financial Markets. And sometimes they're at the last 5 or 10 minutes of the day why they'll run the market back up again. And did they do that today, Bob?
Yeah, they try to, but unfortunately for the elitists, the market was down just under 300 points, and it really should have been down more. And the reason for that is Bank of America reported earnings that were absolutely atrocious. I mean, they were 20 times what the experts expected. I mean, the whole thing the rig is in, and besides that, what happened is that a report, the stress test report, was leaked through one of the news services, and 16 of the major 19 banks in the United States are insolvent.
Well, we've got a real problem because what they should do is treat the major banks like they do the minor banks. If a minor bank is insolvent, the FDIC takes it over and sells it off, and they should be doing that with our major banks because they're the ones who created the problem. In fact, I have never understood, Bob, when the major banks wrote all these derivative contracts that guaranteed the income on these fraudulent bonds, why haven't companies throughout the world demand payment from Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Stanley and J.P. Morgan Chase? I mean, why aren't these banks being required to fulfill their derivative obligations?
A conspiracy to deceive.
Amen to that.
They're all in on it, and you know, you, Stan, and I have known this for 50 years.
Well, I think
we're fortunate that we lasted this long so that we can tell people what we learned during those years. You and I and Ed Griffith and Alan Stang and Gary Allen, who's gone, we were the troopers in those days. And we've got a lot to tell people, and fortunately, many and many more are listening, and they're learning what's being done to them because we understand what these people are up to.
I met Ed Griffin in December of 1962. He was up at my house giving a presentation for the Birch Society, and really one of the most amazing talks I'd ever heard. In fact, I still use one or two of the phrases that Ed used that night, and so it's been a long 47 years at that time, but we're still here, and I think it's so vitally important for the American people to understand that the banks have intentionally created this problem. I mean, they've dried up credit. They've actually, they've increased the interest rate. So if you're a major corporation, you want to borrow money, you're paying 10 or even 15% on that. I mean, there's no way you can make money if you're paying 15% interest on the capital you're working with. But I think more and more banks are going to come down. What is the earnings reports that are coming down from the major corporations? They're supposed to be coming in now.
Well, what they've done, the FASB, which is the Financial Standard Accounting Board, they had designated that all companies would have to mark to market securities and things of value. And the administration, via the power behind government, instructed them, you better not do that. Change the rules back to mark to model. Now, what does all that mean?
All right, hold on.
It means,
you're going to have to tell the people when we get back.
Okay.
Because, of course, it's another fraud to deceive the American people. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty. Our guest this afternoon is Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster, and we're talking about what is really going on today. Bob was just saying somebody has leaked a copy of the so-called stress test on the 19 major banks in the United States, And of course, they don't want people to know. 16 of them are, for all intents and purposes, insolvent. These are the major banks, which, of course, they should treat just like all the other banks. They should, if your local bank is insolvent, the FDIC comes in on Friday night, seizes the bank, seizes the assets, distributes the assets, either operates the bank, gives it to somebody else who can operate it. But with the large banks, they should simply dismantle them because they have intentionally created this whole financial crisis. Why? Because, of course, the people who control them are deeply involved in the occult. They want to destroy the economy of this nation, in fact, the whole world economy, to bring about this one world government. That's what Henry Kissinger says. We've got two alternatives. Either we join the new international order or it's going to be chaos. Well, I think maybe we're going to join the international order and there's still going to be chaos. But Bob was just explaining to us this concept of mark to market, or mark to, what's the other one? Mark to what?
Model.
Mark to model. So what is that really all about? It's a confusing
Well, mark to
term.
market is if you have a security in your portfolio, and in all these banks and insurance companies and brokerage firms have lots of them. And you would go to the market and get the last trade on that day, the reporting day, and you would enter it in, and you would say that General Motors 8% subordinated debentures last traded at 65 instead of $1,000, or $650 instead of $1,000. And you would mark your inventory of those bonds which you own to that market price. And so you would say your portfolio in General Motors bonds for that issue would be, if you bought them at par, down 35%, and each bond would be worth $650. Now, what government has said in their pressure with the FASB is that, we couldn't do that. We're in crisis. You've got to change the rules or the whole system will come down. Well, the whole system is going to come down anyway, but they changed the rules. And they mark to what they call model. Very often it's called mark to myth, M-Y-T-H, like it doesn't exist. So in this bond, if that bond had not been trading for a long time, or there was no market for that bond,
thought. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and of course, Bob was talking about the grading of bonds or various assets that the banks have. What is mark to market? In other words, what is this asset really worth? I've got a bond here. I bought it for $1,000. It's worth $650. I put that in, but that doesn't make my bottom line look very good, and my investors might be concerned. So why don't we just lie about it instead of what they're really worth? That we call mark to. You call it myth or what?
Mark to model or mark
to
myth.
model, okay. Of course,
And
model of myth.
So let's say that these General Motors bonds weren't trading and hadn't been trading for some time. The company, the bank, the brokerage firm, the insurance company, the corporation that owned these could say, well, we think that they're worth 90 cents in a dollar, not 65. So that's the value we're going to put on them. And that is one of the ways that they came up with these absurd, outlandish earnings reports from Citibank and Bank of America and Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase. And they're all just lies. And there's other things that they did in accounting, which I won't go into here because they're too technical to understand for an MBA or a doctorate. Some of these people don't know what I'm talking about either.
Well, Chris, it's the old idea.
The point is, it's all Mickey Mouse. It doesn't mean anything. The earnings are phony. It's another fraud, and they should all be thrown in jail, and they should be certainly kicked out of their jobs.
Well, of course, the old adage is that figures don't lie, but liars can sure figure, and they can talk to the books. But the government's supposed to keep them honest, and of course, the government is controlled by these very people. In fact, the people who head J.P. Morgan Chase, the people who head, Goldman Sachs, they're all members of the Trilateral Commission, this little club that runs our government and has 11 members on in the key positions in the Obama administration. So, government is not going to go after, their own friends, the people who really run the government. We think we elect our president. They we select two presidents, one Republican, one Democrat, and then we vote for them elected in November, and we vote for a candidate not of our choice, but of their choice, and that's exactly what happened last November. It was the large banks who financed Barack Obama's campaign, and it was their magazines, Time and Newsweek and U.S. News Report, that had Obama's picture on the front page, time after time after time after time in the year 2008. That didn't happen by accident. He was their candidate. They created him, and they control him today. But, of course, we can't let the American people know that. Well, basically, what is going to happen as far as our major corporations, because a lot of them are losing a great deal of money, aren't they? And my understanding is that the bonds on so many of our major corporations are going to be going into default. Is that true?
Yes, especially in the high yield that they call junk bond area. Now, they're going to go into default first. We're looking at least 15% of all the junk bonds out there. That would be triple B and below. And then the quality bonds are showing much higher yields because there's a real problem. People don't want to buy them unless the yields are higher.